The Columbus Blue Jackets have a new coach and a new outlook for the upcoming season, but there's still some work to be done. Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets is here to talk about that and all things Blue Jackets next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs are in our rearview mirror, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Blue Jackets, Jay Forster. And Jay, the Blue Jackets still busy. Here we are, toward the end of July. And over the weekend, they make yet another signing. Why don't we start off talking about that?
Yeah, it's been a busy, I think, 8 or so weeks since the last time we talked. I believe we talked just after they hired the new GM. And since then, obviously, draft, free agency, new coach, RFAs are starting to get signed, which is great. Kent Johnson signed Saturday afternoon / morning-ish. I'm not sure about the time difference off the top of my head, but 3 years at $1.8 million, which is a way team-friendlier contract than I was expecting. Especially Johnson didn't have the best year, missed part of it due to injury, missed part of it due to being sent down to Cleveland. Never really kind of got anything going after a pretty darn good rookie season. I think he had 41 or 42 points in his rookie season, which, is not, on a miserable Blue Jackets team, is not nothing. By all accounts, he was going to get a 1-year contract, kind of a show-me deal, go back to the negotiating table a year later, hopefully with a much better season under his belt. But the team has him under control for the next 3 years. And I believe it takes him to, I'm just going to double check here. It takes him to 1 season before becoming a UFA. So he's still under team control at the end of the deal, which is great. Again, the other thing about it being a team-friendly deal, which I just realized right this second, is it's not what I was expecting from a player who has Pat Brisson as his agent. Yeah. So very good work from Don Waddell to get him signed to a 3-year deal now, instead of, again, just kind of kicking the can down the road until next season.
Now, another thing that Don Waddell did, big news earlier this week, the Blue Jackets have a new head coach. Talk to me about the impact and how things may be different this year as a result.
So in the interest of full disclosure, Dean Evason was not my first pick or my second pick, really. But he is the guy that Don Waddell picked. And so, I've decided he is a GM that is known for making smart hires and hiring smart people and letting them do the work. He's really more of a supervisor than a manager, is kind of how I've had it explained to me, which is not a bad way to be. So I've decided that he probably knows who the best guy is. And, I've talked to a couple of people about it. I've talked to our wonderful colleague, Seth Topal, over at Locked On Wild about it. He had lots of things to say. And frankly, the Blue Jackets having an adult in charge is not the worst thing in the world. Right now, Evason has some experience. I think he's got about 260 regular season NHL games under his belt right now. He's got about a 600 or 639 win percentage in those regular season games, I believe. And the Blue Jackets, well, their last 3 coaches were Pascal Vincent, first-time head coach, technically Mike Babcock, which we won't even talk about that, and Brad Larson, another first-time NHL head coach. So, I think a lot of people hoping that Evason is going to bring back kind of the Tortorella days. I don't think that they are quite you can't map Evason onto Tortorella exactly, but there is going to be that structure. There is going to be that stability. I think there is going to be that accountability, which is something that Larson and Vincent both kind of preached in their tenure with Columbus, but never quite managed to kind of get that over the hump. So I'm really interested to see how Evason is going to do with this team, because it's a very different team than the Wild one that he coached quite well in the regular season. Everyone's making noise about how he doesn't know how to win in the playoffs. I'm like, okay, but what if we get to the playoffs first and then we'll figure out, then we'll worry about winning in the playoffs. Evason is not a long-term solution to this problem. I say problem with air quotes. He's not a long-term coaching solution here, I don't think. But he is a coach that's going to take the Blue Jackets from lottery pick to hopefully playoff team. If not, if they can win a round or two during Evason's hiring, like during Evason's tenure here, amazing. Right now, I'm looking for him to bring the team from bad to average. And then when we get to average, we'll worry about the next step.
Makes sense. Other news coming out recently, Patrik Laine out of the Players Assistance Program. He has demanded a trade. What have you been hearing, and what are the Blue Jackets looking for in return if they do deal Patrik Laine?
So I think the first, and I am probably 75% sure that Laine gets traded before the start of the season. However, his trade request came at a time when there was a new GM, an old GM in Jarmo Kekalainen. It was under the old head coach. The team was in a miserable position. Laine clearly wasn't in a good space, like emotionally. He went into the program very soon after that, after being injured. I'm not saying that he's going to come out of the program and rescind his trade request, but he's come out and said, he had said he wanted a fresh start. There's no reason that fresh start can't be with Columbus. It's going to look like a very different team to the one that he left in the middle of, I think it was December or early January that he ended up getting injured and then went into the program very shortly after that. So he hasn't been around the team since early January. Lots of things are different. That being said, I still think the odds are he gets traded. I don't know where. I know Montreal is very interested. I know there's whispers that won't die about Winnipeg. There's a handful of other teams that have kind of made inclinations that they would like to try and acquire Laine. I believe the Islanders are one of those teams as well. I don't know that Patrik Laine is exactly what Lou Lamoriello was looking for because he's under the age of 30, but it's a team name that I've heard out there. Now, in terms of what people or what the rumblings are that the Blue Jackets want back, they always said they wanted a roster player. However, with the signing of Sean Monahan in free agency, which is something that, has happened in the past couple of weeks that we haven't even had a chance to get to because so much has happened for the Blue Jackets in the last month or so. I believe that they have changed their ask from roster player to picks and prospects, or potentially picks or prospects, depending on both the pick and the prospect. So my guess is they'll get futures for Laine if he does move. I know, again, going back to Winnipeg, they have a very vocally unhappy prospect, all things, if we are to believe everything we hear in the media, which we probably shouldn't. I would do Patrik Laine for Rutger McGrossi straight up 1-for-1. Winnipeg probably isn't going to want to do that deal, but, there's some options out there. I wonder if, Montreal has a kind of a logjam of solid young defensemen. I don't know that the Blue Jackets necessarily want to add to their own logjam of young defensemen, but there are options there. So I am cautiously more optimistic for this return. I know people were talking about things like Patrik Laine for Martin Necas 1-for-1. That's not a trade that I would make because, again, it just kind of adds to the logjam, and especially since acquiring a guy like Sean Monahan, they've kind of solved, I'm going to knock on wood here because the last time I said this, everything went horribly wrong. They've kind of solved that problem at center for now. If Sean Monahan can stay healthy, I'm going to knock on wood again because my hockey psychic powers can only be used for evil. But there's lots out there. The Winnipeg one is kind of the best example that I can think of, but I wonder if, there are teams that offer a first-round pick and a lesser prospect, or a second-round pick and a B+, A- prospect. I know Toronto has Nick Robertson, who I don't think technically counts as a prospect anymore. He's reportedly unhappy in Toronto. I wonder if there's something that could be done there. So there's Lots of moving parts still. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out that Patrik Laine is like, actually, now that I'm, and we don't know why he went to the program. No one has talked about it, and he is well within his right to keep that privacy. But I wonder if now that he's in a much better place, like mentally, emotionally, physically, I think people don't understand how much injuries weigh down on a person, especially someone like Patrik, who has been through a lot. He lost his father very suddenly a couple of years ago. And, I wouldn't be surprised if now that he's in a better place, he's like looking at Columbus and being like, actually, maybe I do want to stay here. So I still think he gets traded, but I won't be surprised if he is in a Blue Jackets jersey in October.
All right. Well, I know you'll keep an eye on that every step of the way. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Forster, JAKOBFORSTER. For the first time in a while, I do actually feel cautiously optimistic about recommending that people pay attention to the Blue Jackets. Normally I don't, which is usually my shtick when I come on this show and tell people not to pay attention to this team. But we might not be terrible this year. Another knock on wood, just for good measure. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter. You can find it wherever you get Locked On NHL. We're on every podcasting app of choice. We are on YouTube. We're on SiriusXM. You can find us wherever you get Locked On NHL. And the road to 1,000 subscribers continues for Locked On Blue Jackets.
Hope you get there soon, Jay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But with the NHL and NBA playoffs now in our rearview mirror, there are just fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And look, you've got baseball season in full swing as they head into the second half of the season. The summer games in Paris are going on right now. And of course, you have football futures as training camps open up across the United States. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.